Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie, and today we are going to be exploring all of OAP's new fantasy collection. This is a 5-piece set that features bold, warm toned colors in creams and shimmer formulas, and these three over here are actually shades coming out of retirement, which is pretty exciting. So as always, I will save more of my thoughts for the end after some comparisons. For now, let's just get into the swatches. The first shade we have is Dracarys, and this one is a bold orange inspired by Dragonfire. So I would say this one definitely is very red leaning, maybe like a red orange, but still classified as a true orange, if that makes sense. At least when I see this color, no matter the lighting, it definitely reads as orange and not red. The formula on this one was so fluid and smooth, almost with a crelly-like consistency where there's a little bit of that sheerness on the first coat, but I think you get full opacity on two. There might be a little bit of visible nail line, but for me, it doesn't warrant a third. Next we have Forest, a rich forest green cream. So even though this one is described as a forest green, it's definitely pretty bright or saturated in color, where I would almost call it like a darker grassy or Kelly green, if that makes sense. Either way, this one had a flawless formula that felt a lot more creamy and opaque compared to the last shade, so I think you might be able to get away with this one in one coat, but that obviously depends on your nail length and your application. I had a little bit of a bald spot near the left side of the tip of my nail, so I ended up doing a second coat and it was fully opaque. Up next we have Chosen, a rich purple with bronzy gold shimmer. So this one had another super creamy formula. You can just see how pigmented and full coverage it is on the first coat alone. So again, maybe another one coater, especially if you do have shorter nails. This polish definitely reminded me of some other olive avs like Sumac, where it's a little bit more on that metallic side, and those are also just incredibly opaque and basically one coaters. I honestly feel like I got this one fully opaque in one coat, even on my longer nails, but I went in with a second one just to see if it changed the color or anything, and I don't think it did. I think this color is so gorgeous. Then we have Faerie, which is a warm metallic purple. So even though this one is described as a purple, I want to say it leans very magenta, like there's a very strong pink leaning tone to it, especially compared to the last shade. And as you can see, it has this beautiful pink kind of shimmer that kind of gives it this like internal glow. I think I would say this is my second favorite from the collection. I just love how vibrant it is. It just reminds me of like a jewel tone kind of fall color, but brighter. This one had a little bit more of a squishy, crelly-like kind of base that was, again, super easy to apply. It almost has this pearlescent look, but I think the brush strokes that you see really dissipate and aren't as noticeable. So as you can see here, I did my second coat and I could still make out some nail line, especially in more indirect lighting maybe. It wasn't that noticeable, so I went in with a third coat just to see if that brought it to full opacity, and I would say that it does. Maybe you don't need the third coat, but I guess I would just call this a 2 to 3 coater. And rounding out the collection, we have Magi, a rich berry cream. So you already know this one is my favorite from the collection. I can't stress enough how much I love berry shades like this, and this one is just so gorgeous with how deep it is, but also how saturated it is. I would say this one had a little bit of a crelly leaning formula where it wasn't as creamy and opaque as Forest, but it wasn't as squishy as Dracarys either. It's kind of in between, so I could still see a little bit of nail line after that first coat, but 2 made it perfectly opaque. And here is the Fantasy Collection worn as a skittle. I'm wearing 2 coats of each for everything except for Chosen on my middle finger. That's just 1 coat because I wanted to see if it actually is a 1 coater. And I think I would say it is. I mean, on camera, I feel like I could see where my nail line is, but in real life, it was barely noticeable. I think the colors look so great. They're so bright and bold. The only downside to the shimmers is that they only really shine in direct lighting and a little bit of of bright and direct, but in lower lighting as seen here, they kind of just look like creams. Now for the shades coming out of retirement, the first one we have is Currant, which is described as a burgundy wine cream. This one was from the 2021 pigment collection, and it's so nice to see it back because it is just a classic fall red. You definitely get those wine burgundy undertones, but I feel like this one is also very muted too, so I think it just sets it apart from a lot of other burgundy reds. This one had fantastic coverage and a smooth, easy to apply formula where you only need 2 coats to get it fully opaque. Next we have Josler, which I think is from the very first pigment collection back in 2020, and this one is described as a peacock blue. This is such a beautiful and unique blue in my collection. It's so accurate being described as a peacock color because there's this like teal sort of undertone to it, and I just love it. I shared this in my favorite blues video last year, and I'm just so happy that it's back. I feel like if you're a blue lover, you probably are going to love this one. This one had another super creamy formula, opaque in 2 coats. And the last shade coming out of retirement is Calla Lily. And this one I believe came out in the very first spring collection way back in 2020. This is another favorite of mine. I've shared it a couple of times, whether it was in my spring favorites video or my fairy core video. I always say that this shade just gives me such strong Tinkerbell vibes with that combination of green and gold. It's a beautiful crelly kind of base with a really strong golden shimmer. I just love how glowy this one looks. It is just so magical. Now getting into comparisons, I wanted to start by showing Dracarys next to a true red cream. So this is Essie's Not Ready for Bed, which I feel like is a true neutral red. So you can see Dracarys is definitely orange. The closest orange that Olive has is Bengal Spice, which was a fall orange, so I know they look kind of similar here, but in real life, Bengal Spice is a lot more muted and also has a shimmer. And I did also want to compare this next to Essie's Risk Takers Only, which was from a fall collection, and that's like a true traffic cone kind of orange. So you can see that one is also a little bit more muted, not as muted as Bengal Spice, but it's not nearly as bright as Dracarys. I feel like they look more similar on camera than in real life. Then for Forest, Olive really doesn't have another green like this. I feel like the closest that I had was Borealis, which mine has a little bit of ugly bottle syndrome, but either way, it's just not a dupe. I think the closest shade that I had to this being like a Kelly green was Cirque's Renegade, which is very similar, but a lot lighter. And if anything, this is another one of those cases where I feel like they look so similar in the bottle, but on the nail, they are so different. Then for Chosen, here's a quick bottle comparison next to Nebula, which is another shimmery kind of purple shade, but as you can see, it's totally different, a lot cooler toned, I guess. So for a closer color comparison, I have Zoya's Dominique, which has a golden shimmer in a purple base, but as you can probably tell just from the bottle alone, Zoya's is more of a blackened purple base, and the gold shimmer is a bit of a larger particle, so it almost has this like speckled look versus this sheen in Chosen. Then for Faerie, I think the closest color that I had was Cirque's Wildberry West, which kind of has that magenta leaning color, but that one's a jelly and it has blue shimmer and a hollow sparkle, so definitely not dupes. Then for Magi, I knew I had to see this next to Olive Slater, which, fun fact, is basically the exact Pantone color match for Barbie Pink. So as you can see, that is like a true hot pink. Magi is a deeper berry. So the only other color this immediately reminded me of was OPI's Madam President. These definitely look pretty similar in the bottle, but again, you are going to be able to see the difference on the nail. Madam President is a little bit brighter and more red or pink leaning, almost like a deep strawberry color, while Magi is a deep raspberry. Then for Currant, I knew I had to show this next to Venetian, which is another muted red kind of shade for fall, but as you can see, that one's a bit brighter, not as burgundy, so I thought Holo Taco's I'm Over Brew might be a little bit more similar, but that, if anything, I think is more similar to Venetian, where it's just this brighter berry red. Next for Josler, I really don't have a blue like this, so I just wanted to show this next to Crack's Grotto, which recently came out in the Italy collection, but that's a brighter, almost cerulean shade. I did also just get in Morgan Taylor's fall collection. This one is Just Hanging Around, which is like a really dark, muted, steely teal, so it's not a dupe. And lastly for Calla Lily, I don't have another green shimmer like this, so I wanted to just show this next to Partly Sunny, which came out in the spring collection earlier this year. It's basically the same kind of finish, just a different base color. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Olivab's Fantasy Part 1 collection and their 3 returning shades. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this release because I definitely think it's interesting. If you're familiar with Olivab, you know that she does these seasonal releases, and her fall collections I feel like are definitely some of her best ones, or at least some of my favorites. But as many of you have noticed, Olivab tends to release a lot of colors that are similar to what she already has, just like slightly different. So this lineup is definitely quite the departure from her previous fall collections, which I do appreciate because at some point it's like very repetitive, I think, and so these are like a breath of fresh air. I definitely appreciate how different these are just to her existing catalog, but even to just other collections that we're seeing this time of year. It's not exactly my favorite fall collection, but I am appreciating it for what it is. I feel like because the colors are so bold and warm, they work great as like transitional shades almost. And I don't know if it's a stretch to say, but I feel like they could even almost work for like a Halloween sort of theme, like the purples, the orange. I feel like it's there. But if you do want more like fall colors, maybe you are more excited to see Currant or Josler coming back. Obviously, I am also very excited about Calla Lily because that's another favorite of mine that I've shared in, I think, a previous spring favorites video. But Josler is one of my favorite blues, and I'm just so happy that it is back, especially for this season. So if you are interested in picking anything up, as a reminder, I am an affiliate with Olivab, so if you do want to support me and my channel, you can shop through the link in my description box down below. I also do have a code that you can use to save 10% off, and it is not a one-time use code. A big thank you to anybody who does support me through that. But either way, if you aren't picking anything up, I hope that you like the video. Let me know your thoughts down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!